Our next speaker is Ambassador Joachim Rücker, former President of the United Nations Human Rights Council and former German diplomat. Throughout his career, he has consistently raised concerns over the Iranian regime's systematic human rights violations, and he expressed support for the Iranian people's aspirations for democracy and justice.
Thank you very much for organizing this very important event today. Madam President, distinguished guests, and also thank you for allowing us to pay tribute to these victims and heroes. It was very moving, and I appreciate the opportunity to also relate with their fates. And thank you for the opportunity to discuss the current state of affairs with regard to Iran and its people, including from a human rights perspective. It is fair to say that we, meaning the international community, are confronted with unprecedented challenges in light of the US attacks on Iran, the regime's apparent resilience, and the uncertain future of the somewhat ambiguous MOU, or Memorandum of Misunderstanding, between the two parties. All the more it seems important, and I'm very grateful from what I heard from our distinguished speakers already, to provide context and orientation in these difficult times. Let me try to contribute to this with a number of comments. First of all, we should, and I think this has been done, acknowledge that a foreign military intervention of the type we see, which is not a responsibility to protect humanitarian intervention, something that in my opinion could always be discussed in principle, well, operation as we see it cannot achieve its purported and, in my impression, somewhat changing goals, whether it's regime change, whether it's at least regime compliance with regard to free navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, whether it's regional stability, whether it's proxies, whether it's missiles or nuclear threat, let alone with regard to the brutal suppression of the people of Iran inside the country. Maybe stopping the executions immediately would have been a reachable goal for the United States. So whoever has influence could still insert that into the game, and should, in my view. Stopping the executions. I mean, if you have a leverage, you might as well use it. On the contrary, we currently have a status quo ante minus, politely speaking, meaning things are worse than they were before, and for me that would probably even include the JCPOA, arguable as it was at the time. Having said that, I would also like to stress that empirically, and especially in Iran's case, and it's been said very eloquently, appeasement is not the alternative to war, especially not with regard to stopping the regime's brutal suppression of the Iranian people, the massive rise of executions, including political executions, the shocking disrespect for human rights, which we have seen for so many years now. But when talking about alternatives to war on the one hand and appeasement on the other, we should note that the failure of overwhelming military superiority to bring about regime change should not be mistaken for proof of the regime's strength. This is something that we see a lot in the media these days, that the current status is interpreted as regime strength. The regime and its hostages, the Iranian people, are probably more than ever confronted with at least three very worrying circumstances: a deep structural crisis, especially the economic crisis. It's been said very eloquently, the economic decline, the currency decline, the inflation, the rising poverty, and the chronic shortages which lead to growing social unrest. Secondly, we have a widespread public dissatisfaction. Successive nationwide uprisings have demonstrated profoundly the public rejection of the existing political system and a growing willingness and courage, despite all of the terrible circumstances, to challenge it. And thirdly, increasing divisions within the ruling establishment have been visible. The accumulation of crises, together with the succession of a weaker supreme leader, has intensified, obviously, factional rivalry and undermines the regime's ability to formulate and implement coherent strategies and decisions. And against this background, if we, meaning us, the international community, the people of the world, the people in the European Union, had the right strategy, the chances for success would be real. The regime is not stronger. The regime is weaker. And that strategy, and it's been said, is tangible. It is, so to speak, our third option beyond war and appeasement, as is the motto of this conference. It would mean supporting the Iranian people in their struggle for democracy, for secular governance, for human rights, for gender equality, for the rule of law, for minority rights, for economic opportunity, not to forget, environmental responsibility, and a non-nuclear policy committed to peace and international cooperation. It would mean supporting and recognizing, as has been said, recognizing a credible organized opposition like the National Council of Resistance. And I think the European Parliament has taken a leadership role in this, and I would like to congratulate its members on this achievement. And it would mean recognizing that NCRI has exactly the agenda that is needed, and under the NCRI's platform, free and fair elections would be held within 6 months of the regime's overthrow, with power transferred to the duly elected representatives of the Iranian people. And that might come rather sooner than later, as some of the previous speakers have pointed out. In these free and fair elections, which we hope will materialize, it is conceivable that a monarchist party will run and try to bring the last Shah's son back, who says he is proud of his family's infamous heritage. I'm saying this because it is ultimately the Iranian people's choice in these elections. However, I am very confident they know whom to trust and whom not to trust. We have seen in Germany people from that so-called opposition, monarchist opposition, with Savak t-shirts, running around with Savak t-shirts in Germany. Imagine. So that speaks volumes, I think. What could that support, that recognition look like, especially in Europe, in G7 countries and beyond? Well, it would certainly need statements, recognizing statements from leaders, diplomats, civil society representatives, and many others, explicitly embracing the beyond war and appeasement approach. It would also need to allow the diaspora to gather and express their opinions, even if the regime or the monarchists try to prevent such gatherings. I'm obviously alluding to the 20th June Paris gathering, where this was, I think, the case. It would also need to invite the NCRI representatives to dialogues on the future of Iran. which is happening in the European Parliament. It's not happening yet in the German Bundestag and other parliaments. So we hope that this will happen in that recognition and supporting process which we urgently need. Let me add as a final remark that I also think from my third-party perspective that it would mean something for the NCRI if we enter on this process of being more and more supported, hopefully, by more European leaders. I think it would, in my view, mean that the NCRI continues to invite all of Iran's minorities to participate, that like it's been done, I think, in the preparations for the Paris conference, at least that we gather that from intelligence report one reads. And I think that's very good. I think what we need to see also in the European public is that there is a more united opposition of Iran. So it needs outreach, I think, from all parties, and it also would need to address the gap in public recognition in the media that the NCRI, for reasons I think we all know, is experiencing. And if we can help to achieve these goals, we're happy to do that. I'm happy to do that. Thank you for inviting.